To CNBC TV18 News Center, I'm PArikshit Luthra. The big visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Singapore. This was his 5th visit to the country, and why was it important? Well, India and Singapore have decided to elevate ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Did you know that Singapore is the biggest FDI investor into India? Over the last 20 years, more than $160 billion have come from Singapore-based companies into the Indian market. Singapore is also India's 6th largest trading partner with $36 billion worth of trade last year itself. And today, more than 4 MoUs have been signed between the two countries, perhaps the most important one being in the field of semiconductors. We heard that Singapore-based companies could consider manufacturing in India as well. Prime Minister Modi made a big pitch to Singapore CEOs. He met at least 15 companies, CEOs of companies like Capital Land, which is going to invest almost 46,000 crores in India over the next 4 years. Also, Temasek, Semicon, and others, even Blackstone for that matter. So he said that India has policy stability right now, policy transparency, and they must come and invest in India. Let's listen in to what the Prime Minister said.
एयर इंडिया का आपके साथ यहाँ मर्जर होना ये अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़ा काम हुआ है, लेकिन ये भी हम सोचे कि भारत विद इन इंडिया डोमेस्टिक एयर ट्रैफिक के लिए हम चाहते हैं कि कंपटीशन की स्थिति बने, अधिक कंपनी आए। आज वो स्थिति नहीं है, बहुत पूरा स्काई ओपन पड़ा है जी। और मैं चाहूंगा कि आप में से जो कंपनियां उस दिशा में भी आगे आना चाहती हैं, तो उसके लिए भी अवकाश है।
Let me go across to our special guest right now. We have with us Mr. Ashok Chandak. He is the president of the Indian Electronics and Semiconductor Association. We also have with us Amitendu Palit joining us from Singapore. He is a professor at National University of Singapore. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Amitendu Palit, as a whole, how important do you think this visit of the Prime Minister was, elevating ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership, talking about greater collaboration in semiconductors, collaboration in green hydrogen, green ammonia, cross-border electricity trade, and much more? Both sides saying sky is the limit. Does this really improve the environment for greater investments between the two countries?
Thank you, Parikshit, for inviting me to this show on a day where we have seen a significant escalation and upgradation in the quality of India-Singapore economic engagement. Now, let me begin with the fact that, as you are very much aware, India's relationship with Singapore has been very stable over the last 3 decades, since the time India announced its Look East policy. And from that time onward, if there is one country in Southeast Asia with whom India has really deepened its contact, communication, and currency in a broader sense, it is Singapore. And this was the first country with whom India signed a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. Singapore has effectively worked as India's gateway to Southeast Asia into the ASEAN. It has worked as a major interlocutor for India with respect to the greater Asia-Pacific and APEC region. And finally, today, a stage has come when India and Singapore are closely working together in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, the point that I would like to make in the context of the Prime Minister's visit is that over the last 1 week, last week we had the India-Singapore ministerial round, which was a significant bilateral engagement at the G2G level between the two countries. It's a rather unique mechanism where there are 4 senior members, cabinet ministers from India, engaging with 4 of their counterparts on the Singapore side. And that ISMR actually laid the foundation of the next stage of cooperation that India and Singapore are looking to advance together, which was kind of put to paper today during the Prime Minister's visit. So we have had the MOUs signed in 4 important sectors: semiconductors, digital technology, skills and education, and healthcare. Now, what I want to focus upon is that all these 4 sectors are areas of strategic cooperation. They're not just economic cooperation, they're strategic cooperation in the sense that countries like India and Singapore, much as the rest of the world, considers these to be sectors on which their overall economic and national securities are heavily dependent. We all understand and appreciate the importance of semiconductors, how important access to semiconductors is in running modern economies, beginning from automobiles to gadgets. We understand the importance of education and skills in pushing forward the borders of innovation and frontier. We understand how much digital connections matter today. And finally, the significance of healthcare. So, taken all that together, I think these four sectors are a symbol of the relationship between the two countries having got elevated to a comprehensive strategic partnership, which means it's not just the bilateral trade and economic sphere that is being covered, but it's much more than that. But the foundation is coming through the economic relationship. And I would personally rate it as also a very important signal for India to be delivered to Singapore at a point in time when India has affirmed its commitment to the ASEAN architecture and also looks forward to working with Singapore in the Indo-Pacific economic framework.
Right. That's a very important point because the comprehensive strategic partnership is built on a pillar of economic security for the two countries, energy security, trade security, defense ties as well. Let me go across to Mr. Chandak. Mr. Chandak, how do you welcome the MoU between India and Singapore on semiconductor ecosystem partnership just before India hosts the Semicon? Do you feel, because what we've been told by the Ministry of External Affairs, that there are Singapore companies which have actually visited 4 sites in India to consider manufacturing in the country. Do you expect some announcement soon?
So my view is this is a very landmark moment, and this MOU is not just the paperwork, but I would call a celestial alignment, strategically important and full of promise. I would call this is a cosmic waypoint on the India's transformative path towards becoming technologically self-reliant, and particularly into this field of semiconductor. I just want to bring attention of the viewers. Just 6 weeks ago, ISA did a MOU and a strategic partnership with Singapore's Semiconductor Industry Association. And there were 3 key points in that. One, how these two countries can work together in terms of the investments across each other, mutual benefit. How do we get the technology partnerships going? Either way, both ways. And also talent and skilling. The way Singapore has developed its semiconductor ecosystem over the last 3 decades, I think this is really mind-boggling. They have been able to achieve everything what is required as an end-to-end ecosystem, and we can definitely learn much about from them. Now, coming to the investment from Singapore, actually, we are already working with SSIA to bring the delegation into the country. Semicon India is happening next week. Some of the guys are coming. And beyond that, there is already a business delegation which is being planned. So I would call this is a very important step, milestone, considering the overall ecosystem of Singapore, and there are several advantages what we see Singapore ecosystem brings. You know, just to carry little statistics here, Singapore right now has about 8% of the world's semiconductor production. Complete end-to-end, be it materials, the test equipments, the wafer fabs, the assembly, the warehouse, everything. It's close to India, so travel time is not a problem. The time zone is not an issue. And there are a lot of Indian diaspora in Singapore. Actually, language is not a barrier. We see Singapore is a very well-placed country, very much natural ally for us from the semiconductor sector perspective. And there are several global companies, those are having design centers in India, are also operational in Singapore.
Mr. Chandak,
Global Foundries, Infineon, and so forth.
I'll ask a follow-up question because the Prime Minister visited the facility of AEM and there he heard how they're making semiconductors and they heard their plans for India as well. So do you consider AEM as a company which probably has plans in advanced stages to invest and make in India?
Well, as of now, I don't think I would be able to give a clear answer on that, but I can only tell you there are several Singapore-based, Singapore-originated companies, including several global companies having the headquarters and operations in Singapore, are definitely looking at India as a next investment opportunity. And it's not only investment opportunity. Because if we were to look at, the overall global semiconductor market is going to grow to almost $1 trillion by 2030 from $550 billion of last year. So there is a significant opportunity, and no single country would be able to cater to that, neither Singapore nor in Taiwan or anybody for that matter. And this is the global business that needs the global partnerships. And this is where I see this is very important that Singapore, India joins hand, bring each other's strength, and particularly India's design strength. We have more than 150,000 design engineers. And most of the economic value is in a design, and a IPR, and a product creations.
Right. So that is what the Prime Minister has also said, design in India and design for the world. Let me also go across to Mr. Palit once again. Mr. Palit, how important do you think is this visit from a point of view on increasing foreign direct investments into India? In the last 24 years, 24% of India's FDI has flown from Singapore. It's roughly over $160 billion. Do you think this comprehensive strategic partnership will enable greater FDI flows and maybe greater imports from India as well? Because currently there is a deficit, and that deficit is in favor of Singapore.
Parikshit, I think I will draw your attention to 2 points here. The first is Singapore has for a very long time been among the largest sources of FDI for India. I mean, there's a flip-flop that keeps happening between Singapore and Mauritius. But I think insofar as Singapore is concerned right now, about a quarter of inward FDI that flew into India over the last year originated in Singapore. Now, there's a point that I would rise to mention here. The FDI inflows from Singapore to India comprise of 2 categories. The first is what the Singaporean companies are investing in. And the second is also the fact that many other investors find it feasible to mobilize resources from Singapore for onward investment into India. So this connects to the point that I had mentioned earlier, that Singapore has been a gateway for India into the Asia Pacific, and there are several Asia Pacific enterprises who work on taking Singapore as a hub, as a facility through which they can obtain investor access into India. Obviously, this current visit of the Prime Minister, the framework that has been announced subsequent to that, the initiatives that have been proposed are certainly going to enhance India's credentials as a location where there are a variety of long-term investment options, and Singapore is going to play an important role in acting as a facilitator for that, because as you note, it's not just a question of Singapore investing into India, but the framework that is required for it in terms of cooperation between banks, in terms of cooperation between agencies, the digital connectivity in terms of Pay Now and UPI, the connection in aviation, the connection in education skills, and most importantly, the political comfort that the 2 countries enjoy with each other are all factors that go into the establishment of a strong and stable investment partnership. So that being the condition, I am quite hopeful that investments will enrich the Indian business landscape from Singapore. With respect to the other point that you raised on imports and exports, see, it all depends upon what the character of these investments are. I mean, if they're more of a domestic market-oriented variety, then there's one implication.
Mr. Palit, one quick question, because we have 1 minute left. If I can just, there's one point in the joint statement which caught my attention, is that was about cross-border electricity trade, collaboration on green hydrogen and green ammonia. Do you think that is something that India could provide to Singapore in the days to come?
Parikshit, you are aware of the initiative between Semicon Singapore and Greenco India in terms of producing green ammonia in India, which is going to be exported to Japan from the beginning of next year, and also the fact that that is going to be used as a fuel for bunkering in the Singapore port. So I think the collaboration has already begun, and the green economy, clean economy, renewable energy are areas where India and Singapore have already started working very effectively. There's a strong B2B partnership along with third country participation that is happening over there. And I would very strongly affirm my commitment to that being another area of strategic cooperation between the two countries.
All right, we've run out of time, but thank you very much to Mr. Chandak and Mr. Amitendu Palit for joining us on the program on a historic day when India and Singapore have decided to elevate ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership. On that note, we take a short break, but don't go anywhere. When we return, we'll get you more news from the electric vehicle ecosystem. Luxury car maker Mercedes-Benz has launched the Maybach Electric at a price tag of 2.25 crore rupees. We'll tell you more about that when we're back.